Welcome to Science Snippets. I'm your host, Mr. Leibner, here with my co-host,
Mrs. Ansel. We love Earth science, and we're here to talk about some current events in the field.
So buckle up and get ready to blast off, because Earth science rocks! In this episode of Science Snippets, we're going to talk about two articles. The first of which is about the United Arab Emirates space program and their future plans to send exploration craft to the asteroid belt. This article comes from a website called autoevolution.com. Mrs. Ansel, did you have an opportunity to read this article?
So I did read it a few days ago. It's pretty much about how the UAE is making strides in their interstellar activity and their travel. They were one of the first Arab countries to actually go to Mars, correct? Is that what I had read?
Yeah, that's what this article is saying. And I think something people don't realize all the time is that America and NASA are not the only groups that have gotten to Mars. There have been several different space programs reach Mars. China has Mars activity, the European Space Union, and the United Arab Emirates have done some work in Mars exploration as well.
Right, and now they're looking at going past Mars to explore the asteroid belts. I think there was the 7 major asteroids in the belt that they want to actually research many years in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the deal with programs like this. They're not planning on a program for next year. They're planning on a long-term program. They're talking about over the course of the next 5 to 10, 15 years. Because in the article, it describes how long it will actually take them to get to the asteroid belt. The travel to the asteroid belt alone, after going around Venus and after going around Earth to gain some speed using the gravitational force, is 2 years. So
Right.
Just traveling alone, they're going to send this thing off and hopefully pass by 7 of these asteroids, as you mentioned, and then ultimately land on one.
Right, because it's taking a year around Venus and then a year around Earth to slingshot it to even get enough momentum to get as far as asteroid belt. I think I read the word slingshot in there. Did you?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it ends up being 2.2 billion mile journey that this spacecraft will do over the course of how many years?
The journey itself to the asteroid belt is 2 years.
Okay.
So yeah, it's got quite a ways to go. It's going to pick up speed orbiting the planets first and then go.
So they do talk about how there's a lot of challenges as far as doing this kind of a mission, as far as spacecraft design and engineering. And I would like to know, they haven't released a lot of information about it yet, but I would like to know if it's new technology they're having to do to have a spacecraft that will be able to last that long and travel that far.
Yeah, one of the things they said that they discovered was some of the logistics of spacecraft engineering and coming into contact with other celestial bodies through this Mars exploration. And part of that, they've said, will help them down the road towards exploring these asteroids. But they said it's a magnitude higher than that in complexity. So this project is quite a bit more challenging than what they've already done to this point. But it's really neat to see multiple companies and multiple agencies getting involved in this kind of exploration.
Absolutely.
The second article that we took a look at was about the long-term approach and some of the shortcomings of the current methodology and essentially approach to space sciences and astronomy. Tell me about that article.
Well, the article we read was called Astronomy Needs a New Long-Term Approach, New Paper Argues, by Paul Sutter, who's an astrophysicist at Stony Brook and Flatiron Institute. So basically, he talked about how their current structure isn't going to work in the long run because primarily it's crazy expensive. These projects are millions, if not billions of dollars, and they last a really long time for the entirety of the mission itself. So they're having a hard time justifying funding and maintaining funding for such projects.
Yeah, so there's been a big boom in privatized space flight, space travel. SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, all these different companies are getting involved in this, but the really big organizations are still government funded.
Mhm.
And so you have to be able to justify to the people that are paying for it, which is the taxpayers in most cases, what this money is going to do and how it's going to pay off. And this article is articulating that, in the traditional sense, these are really long-term projects, like the one we just talked about. You're dealing with a 10-year project. And as you just said, it can cost hundreds of millions or $1 billion. And what's the return for the average taxpayer on that?
Right.
They're not really seeing dividends for that in any tangible capacity.
Yeah. So if taxpayers see, oh, this big chunk of my money is going toward this, what do I get out of it? People
Yeah.
want gratification. So we need to look at how we can make this more beneficial and pretty much make a better connection to the public as far as astronomy goes.
Yeah, I think part of the interesting thing for me reading through this was the stuff that they're talking about developing some of these longer term programs, like putting a observation post on the backside of the moon, backside obviously relative to our location, will give us another viewpoint of interstellar space without the obstructions that we get in our atmosphere, because we've got to deal with so many things from filtering out different wavelengths of light, et cetera, et cetera. And when you go out to there, you don't have to do that. But the problem is, while that's neat and that's great science, again, what's the return for us to spend that? And I think most people, when they see things like this, or they see the moon landing or the Parker Solar Probe or whatever it is, they don't necessarily realize that a lot of the technologies being employed in these programs does come back to Earth in some fashion, whether it's dehydrated food or an ability to grow and increase plant life in challenging environments, or just a little bit better understanding of stellar physics and how that can help us.
Right. And the author of this article also goes into suggestions for how we can make it better. One of them is, making those shorter, smaller missions so that you can do things more quickly to see return on your benefit, like more Hubble-like telescopes and things of that nature in the future.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Crowdfunding has been a thing that's been really popularized in the last 20 years. It'd be interesting to see how those kind of things, if you're, let's say that you want to engage in one of these longer term missions that needs a lot of money or a lot of financial support, I wonder if they're interested in looking down those avenues, or they had mentioned maybe reaching out to some private entities to help with the funding, or essentially sponsor some of these missions, or at least in part. And so I don't know what it looks like, but it looks
Right.
like things are going to have to change if they want to continue to explore.
Right. Bring in professionals besides just scientists to the, different engineers, people with other backgrounds, which I feel like we've seen more recently in the privatized part of space travel. We've seen more of the normal person, if you want to say so, being involved in space travel.
Yeah. So a couple of neat articles we thought we would share with you guys. Hopefully that was of some value to you. We will do our very best to decide, once we pick a platform for how this podcast is going to be administered, to give a link to each of these articles if you have any interest in reading them for yourselves, or the linked study therein. So thanks for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Science Snippets. If you like this podcast, feel free to subscribe.
If you didn't like this podcast, you're wrong. If there's an article you're interested in hearing us discuss, please leave a comment.
Thanks, friends.
And until next time.